I'm here to bring some enlightenment to the concept of enlightenment. Most people think it's some concept of being a wise old man that's up in a misty mountain top in an anime cartoon like Naruto or Samurai Jack. And I'm here to break the myths down and set the record straight.
The Voices of Victory podcast show.
Voices of Victory. Vision. Voices of Victory. Leadership. Voices of Victory. Workplace-related topics. The Voices of Victory.
Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory.
It's time for the show. You are now listening to the Voices of Victory podcast show.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mario D. Leone.
Hello and welcome to the Voices of Victory podcast show. I am your host, Mario D. Leone, and today we're going to talk about enlightenment. All right, so I'm going to give you a preface up front right here, right now, to understand non-duality. There's a lot of philosophies that we'll probably discuss, but we're going to understand non-duality today. What non-duality can be understood as, it is a challenge of direct experience. What the hell does that mean, right? Well, let's first break down that non-duality isn't a belief system to be understood. It's actually a reality to be experienced. And most people are stuck in the intellectual phase. What they're trying to do is trying to logically prove or disprove that there's some kind of concept. However, the realization of non-duality is a profound shift in perception. It connects to our perceptual ability, and that goes beyond thought. You can't think your way into it. You can only become aware of it. So the gap between intellectual knowledge and direct experience is where a lot of people struggle, and that's where a lot of the struggle actually is. So the idea that enlightenment is some kind of permanent state of bliss is a myth. It's a myth that trips up a lot of seekers. When we see a lot of the yogis in India and they're all quite happy, that happiness wasn't just instant meditation, add water. That was something to be cultivated. This was something that they cultivated over time. And it wasn't just an instant thing, like instant coffee. Now, that being said, we have to take a look at certain things because the idea of enlightenment, it's not permanent. And from a non-dual perspective, it's not about gaining anything. It's like what Bruce Lee said, you don't add clay to a statue. You strip away the unnecessary until the truth is revealed. That's what that's about. And people are trying to intellectually add on to it. So that's where the big problem comes. It's about stripping away what was never real to begin with. And it's less like climbing some misty mountain peak where you become some flawless, untouchable being, and more like coming back down to a raw, authentic reality, and a reality that isn't always comfortable. So guess what? The first and hardest pain point is the ego unravels. And no, it is not the ego death. We are going to unravel that, speaking of which. Our entire sense of me, the me and the I, my story, my wins, my failures, my memories, my narratives, it all gets called into question. When inquiry begins to cut through the illusion of the separate self, then it can actually feel terrifying to some people. And many traditions can sometimes refer to it as the dark night of the soul, right? Because there's a part of you that's falling away, so to speak. But it's not really. It's a stretch of confusion. There's some emptiness there where the familiar identity of who you are, it starts to collapse. You don't really lose who you are. It's more like understanding who you are. And the collapse literally pulls down all of the walls that the ego has actually built to keep old wounds buried up. And suddenly those fears and anxieties, the traumas that you thought were long gone, they come flooding back. And it's without the self there to keep them suppressed because they have to be felt fully and they have to be felt directly. The process can hurt because what used to actually protect you, your very identity of who you are, is melting away, starts to dissolve. And then there's the painful recognition of how much we've been conditioned and trained to chase pleasure and avoid pain. And non-duality shows both are just experiences. They're experiences appearing in awareness. And that doesn't make pain disappear. Come on. In fact, you may even feel it more. It might become more vivid since you're no longer numbing or resisting or escaping. And that's the thing. Some people will escape reality in the unhealthy context when they start to use meditation as an escape for a healthy context. you'd be surprised what that can do. And it's a way of transcending that reality. That's what that's about. So we want to make it so clear your pain doesn't disappear. It's a cleaner path. It's cleaner in the sense it's not like clean versus dirty. It's the things that you don't need start to fall away. The things that you hang on to start to melt away. It's a sensation. It's without all the extra mental suffering or running away from it. You learn to sit with your feeling, right? Think of it as a loss, another loss in the crumbling of old beliefs, your carefully built worldview about the meaning of life itself, the universe, source, God, whatever you want to call it. It can all get blown into pieces, and suddenly nothing is certain, and you're left with the raw space of not knowing. It feels like groundlessness, but it's actually what makes space for something that's absolutely real. And at the core, this path sometimes comes from resisting reality. And that happens to a lot of us. We get into situations, and the situations we don't want to be in. So we resist reality. And by resisting reality, we resist the situation. So as a result, we want to escape pain and go to pleasure. So what do? We actually go into escapism, is what happens. We go to escape towards the negative things in life, the unhealthy escapisms, such as addiction and so on. That's how that goes down. But after a while, it's like nothing is certain. Nothing is certain. And at the core, it comes from that resistance. The tighter you cling onto your stories, your narratives, your identities, your desires, the more suffering you actually create. And enlightenment isn't about escaping experience. It's about ending the internal war with it. It starts to collapse. And it's just signs. If you're feeling any pain, there's signs that just the old structures are breaking apart. And it doesn't have to be. You can learn to kind of process it. The more you study it, the more it can become peaceful. That's what I'm basically saying. So what's left on the other side isn't some blissed out mountaintop fantasy. It's just a deeper, unshakable freedom. When there is, quote unquote, no person or no construct with life, when there's no person that has a conflict with life, then you realize that peace doesn't depend on the circumstances anymore. Joy becomes natural, not manufactured. And the ride isn't easy, but it's definitely without a doubt worth it. And at the end, you start to discover who you really are. And that's the fun part. So while that does break down the opening non-duality of the show, we can now talk about enlightenment. We're going to go over the common myths about enlightenment. I'm going to give you the straight talk on what it is and what it isn't. The very first thing we're going to talk about is what I call the veil of ignorance. I want to say that again. The veil of ignorance. Every person lives with a veil. It's not a physical veil. It's not something you could point at. It's the veil of ignorance. The veil of ignorance is literally what keeps us from seeing the true nature of reality clearly. It's why people mistake themselves for a limited, struggling individual instead of the limitless awareness that's possible. The veil isn't the same thickness for everyone. As we live, we reflect, we meditate, we breathe, and we practice self-awareness, and that veil becomes thinner and thinner and thinner the older we get. The more discipline we get and more honest we are with our inner work, the more the light of the truth actually starts to shine in. Now, here's the key. This veil doesn't fall away because we force it down or try to push our way through it. It dissolves through knowledge. Knowledge that gets applied and becomes experience. Specifically, self-knowledge. Practices like meditation, breath work, they prepare the mind. They quiet the storm. They make that veil weaker, and transparent. When you find yourself falling into your own traditional habitual patterns and you start to do this work over and over again, what starts to happen is that veil becomes very thin. And when you were falling into certain patterns, suddenly you now can make better choices. Instead of going for the chocolate addiction, you can actually switch towards broccoli. Believe it or not, that veil becomes very thin. But the final unveiling is when knowledge clicks into place, that you're not a restless seeker. You're a person that's whole, complete awareness already. With that said, let's go through the common myths that keep this veil of ignorance in place. Myth number 1. I'm going to smack this bee's nest really hard. Enlightenment means no mind or empty mind. So, in martial arts, it comes from the term Mushin. I'm a martial artist, and Mushin connects to no mind. It's almost like like being able to operate on autopilot without any thought. That's what that means on a physical martial arts sort of sense. And there's many definitions of that. But people often think, well, if I could just stop my thoughts, I'll be enlightened. Sounds peaceful, right? Wrong. Here's the issue. Your thoughts aren't the problem. Awareness, which is really the real you, is present. It's present whether the mind is quiet or noisy. You don't suddenly just become awareness when the mind stops. You already are it. And trying to kill your thoughts is like rearranging furniture on the deck of the Titanic, hoping that somehow it's going to stay put. But it doesn't. Here's the truth. Here's the truth to myth number one. Enlightenment means no mind or empty mind. It's about understanding at a deep, profound level that you are the one who sees the mind in all of its moods, and understanding that you are the witness of that. Let's go on to myth number two. Enlightenment requires ego death. Yeah, this one's pretty dramatic. Like, to wake up, I must destroy my ego. Yeah, okay. But what if that were true, right? Your dog who doesn't have an ego that's human-based would already be enlightened. And clearly, that's not how it works. Okay, the ego, the I notion, the me, and the my, it doesn't disappear. It shifts position. And before self-knowledge, the ego says, I am limited. I am a limited, struggling person. That's before self-knowledge. After self-knowledge, it says, I am awareness. I am awareness itself. This is the body, this is the mind. They're a part of me, but they don't necessarily define me. So enlightenment isn't some kind of ego death or oh, the ego must die. And I see people like in YouTube comments all the time, it's an ego death. I had an ego death. It's ego re-education. Okay, that's what that is. The ego moves from center stage to the side, and it's just no longer running the show. And I need to make that very clear so people actually understand that. Myth number three, enlightenment is nirvana, a desireless state. Yeah, all right, here we go. So some imagine enlightenment as a kind of permanent inner retirement, okay? No wants, no desires, no striving. I want to be absolutely real with you, okay? When we're in the waking life, do you not want something? Do you not want a drink of water? Do you not want a little comfort? Do you not want some conversation? Okay, those are desired states. Desire itself isn't the enemy. What causes suffering is the binding desire, how we take our desire and bind it to something specifically. So when you can't be at peace until your desire is met, I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when I have the house. I'll be happy when I have the car. I'll be happy when. We've heard people say that before. And self-knowledge removes the sting. And desires can still come and go, but they don't boss you around. You want things, sure, but you're not agitated by them anymore. Or you may just become indifferent to them. You may say, you know what, I just really don't want that anymore. I don't know why, I just don't. And you release it. You almost like let go of it in a very healthy way. Let's go on to myth number four. So let's talk about it. Myth number four, enlightenment means always living in the now. We've heard it all before. Stay in the present. That's the key. Be mindful. And I understand mindfulness has its value. It calms the mind. It gets you grounded. But here's the thing. You can't be in the now, even when you're remembering the past or planning the future. You're doing it in the present moment. So enlightenment isn't about clinging to the now. You don't cling and hold on to the now. It's about realizing that awareness, the awareness of your true self. It's outside of time. It's outside of space. It's outside of past, future, and present modes. You remain untouched because you kind of connect to the awareness of who you are at the core. Another way to look at it, because there is value, there's value living in the now. Like if you're an archer, hitting the target would be the future, and looking into the quiver behind you is the past. But the quality of pulling the bow and arrow, that's living in the now. This kind of connects itself to the concept of karma yoga. So it's living in the now. It's focusing on the doing, right? You're in the process. You're in the process of. I don't want to use the term doing, but you're in the process of. And when you're in the process, it's all about mastery. So when you focus on that mastery of pulling the bow and arrow, you hit the target as a byproduct. But some people that are results driven, the people that are most result driven, they are connected to the outcome of hitting the target. And they're like, what's wrong with that? I'm Like, there's nothing wrong with it. When you become process driven and you get into the process of pulling the bow and arrow, then the quality of the shot will hit the target as a byproduct. So in other words, when you hit the target, it can actually be a byproduct of mastery, literally mastery. So it does connect to karma yoga in that sense that we're giving up the results to the divine, but we're focusing on mastery in the moment. The mastery of, okay, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to master what it is I'm doing and then give up the results to the divine. That's one way to look at it. There's a lot of people, they're going to have a lot of different points of view, but that's mine. So when it comes down to it, your awareness is outside of that past, present, future. Let's talk about myth number 5. Enlightenment is the big experience of oneness, right? So people often expect fireworks. They expect the cosmic moment. When is it going to happen? When am I going to merge with everything, right? They fall into this cosmic moment where you suddenly merge with everything. But Vedanta says, why merge? You already are. Non-duality means there's only one reality and you're it. That's the game of hide and seek, ladies and gentlemen. And separation isn't just a thought. It's an illusion created by the mind. So instead of chasing an experience of oneness, recognize the truth. You already are the awareness in and through everything. There's nothing to achieve. It's just something to comprehend and understand. And that's myth number 5. Myth number 6 is that enlightenment is a transcendental state. We've heard that before, right? Many seekers of enlightenment, they believe enlightenment is some higher mystical state, maybe a permanent bliss or a trip to samadhi, okay? And you never come out of that. But all of these states, no matter how blissful they are, again, this is not about the cultivation of happiness or the cultivation of blissfulness. That's what a yogi can do, is they cultivate the blissfulness, they cultivate the happiness, okay? But no matter how blissful, all of these states belong to the mind, and the mind is always changing. It always changes. Awareness, on the other hand, never changes. It witnesses all states. It witnesses joy, sadness, bliss, boredom. You could look at emotions as like a color palette, and non-duality allows you to experience all the colors and paint your reality with them. That's how I want you to understand it. But what happens in our normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill life is we experience all these emotions, and instead of painting with the colors, we push them away. You see, I don't want blue. I don't like blue. I don't like red. I don't want to feel red. Right? And they kind of push those things away. So enlightenment isn't about climbing into some new state. It's about realizing that you are the witness of all states and free of them all. That's what that's about. It's exactly what that's about. Myth number 7, enlightenment means an eternal bliss. And again, we can't confuse eternal bliss with the cultivation of bliss, because even the best yogis still have to cultivate happiness. Like, all our practices are helping them cultivate aspects, right? So very important, the aspect of bliss and happiness can be cultivated, right? So this is a pretty seductive one that, once enlightened, I'll be happy forever. Yeah, I'm going to say no to that. I'm going to give a little pushback and say no. Bliss is still an experience, and experiences come and go. Even enlightened people feel sadness, they feel frustration, they feel anger, and they even feel the difference. Like, that's another thing too. There's people that will try to poke and prod at other enlightened folks saying, oh, well, you're enlightened, you shouldn't feel anger. And that's the biggest crock of BS, if you want my opinion, because those experiences don't necessarily shake the core of who you are, right? Self-knowledge gives you a rock solid confidence that you're more than whatever emotion that passes through you, because it's not all about the deeper idea of I have to chase endless good vibes. You can think of endless good vibes as a cultivation. It's an ongoing practice. Like, happiness is a practice. I think we need to understand that in 2025. It's a practice, ladies and gentlemen. I want to be so clear about that. Myth number 8, enlightenment means fulfillment of all desires. Okay, and I think people have a tendency to get hooked up in the concept of moksha. But enlightenment gets sold as a cosmic vending machine that once you're awake, all your dreams will come true. I have heard of stories that the more people get involved in meditation practices and breathwork practices, that their manifestation does open up. I've heard that from several people. their experiences. These are like live reports from people that I've spoken to. And I've seen it. It's pretty wild. It's pretty interesting at the end of the day. It's like once you're awake, all your dreams will come true. This is wrong again. Enlightenment doesn't magically deliver your perfect partner, your perfect bank account, or your beach house in San Francisco. Okay? What changes you is you stop measuring your worth by all of these desires that are fulfilled. You start to interpret life through a lens of awareness, not through your cravings, and you allow some of those cravings to come and go. I have seen breath work and meditation open up the passageway towards it, but it's not a guaranteed vending machine where you put in vibes and get out candy all the time. It's not always. There's a lot of people that are going to disagree with me on that, and that's fine. It's going to, and the reason why it's different for everybody. When I say that, when I actually speak on that concept of the cosmic vending machine, it's different for everybody. It really is. Some people can manifest incredibly, and other people not so much, and that's just part and parcel to it. Okay, and I'm not here. This is not a manifestation video. This is a myth enlightenment video. So, and now back to our show. That's what we're going to say. So the beautiful twist is when desire actually loses its grip, life starts to feel lighter. And I've always used this. Is that enlightenment is almost like being light in the heart. The heart feels lighter and freer, even if you're still chopping wood and carrying water, just like before. So I like to say the heart does become lighter. Absolutely. We could say enlightenment is that. But I find it relative to the veil of ignorance. That ignorance is being lifted. And as a result of that ignorance being lifted, we become more enlightened. So, for example, it's like if you didn't know something, if you didn't know how to fix a car and someone taught you how to do it, you're enlightened with that knowledge. It's not spiritual enlightenment, but what happens is that veil of ignorance. You know, if you thought that you couldn't do it, if you thought you couldn't work on a car, and suddenly you worked on a car and you were able to do it, that's an enlightenment. You're like, wow, I didn't think I could do that, and I did. And that's almost a level of it. But it's not a spiritual enlightenment. It's a knowledge enlightenment. It's removing that ignorance of, I thought I couldn't, to, wow, I can't believe I did that. Think of it that way. There's a difference between enlightened and spiritual enlightenment, right? That's kind of what we're talking about. So the real point that I want to drive home, and I'm going to finish the show right here, right now, is that none of these myths actually capture enlightenment because they treat it like something that you have to experience or achieve or hold on to. Vedanta and non-duality, enlightenment is knowledge. It's the clear recognition that you are awareness itself. Now, where things get interesting with this is the intellect. Our intellect is literally a double-edged sword on the non-dual path. On one hand, it is so useful because it can point you towards the inquiry, help you notice the patterns of the mind, help you cut through a lot of the illusions in this world. But the very same intellect that helps you start the absolute journey also can be the biggest obstacle and impediment. Why? Why is that happening? Because the intellect is built on separation. It thrives on dividing. It thrives on naming. It thrives on analysis. It thrives on categorizing. That's its job. The non-duality is not an object you can dissect with your theory or try to pin it down. The intellect keeps trying to grasp. It tries to grasp reality as if it just was another conceptual idea. They're putting it in an intellectual box. But reality can only be experienced directly. Direct experience. And this is where the feelings actually come in. The intellect often steps in as a defense against raw experience. Instead of feeling grief and fear and love, the mind jumps into explaining it, labeling, and analyzing it. Okay, and this gives that illusion of control, but it also keeps us one step removed from life as it is. And I use the word as it is. Life is as it is. That's what's important. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. So we have to look at things as they are. We have to look at people as they are, not as we want them to be. That's what happens. The non-duality, it requires that everything be allowed, every sensation, every emotion, every idea, without interference, without interference. So what happens is the intellect blocks non-duality when it starts to insist on an explanation over experience. That feelings point directly to presence, while intellect tries to turn the presence into a mental object. Let me give you another example of this. I'll give you another example in terms of psychology, okay? you might have that one friend that is like totally has a psychological background. Maybe they have a psych background and they're listening to someone else's feelings. A friend comes to them and says, I'm really sad. I had someone pass away, and they just want to express their emotions. And instead, the psychological friend will jump in and start to intellectualize everything. Well, the real reason why you're feeling that is because of this, and you're intellectualizing everything. And it's like, what happened to just holding space and actually being present and just allowing the person to feel, right? And that's where non-duality comes in as a superpower, is allow things to be, surrender to what is. That's what that's about. So the key isn't destroying your intellect or tearing it out of you, but it is to see the limits, that once it's recognized as just another appearance within your awareness, then it no longer has the power to block what has already been there. It's already been there. It's always here. That's pretty much it. It turned out to be a very long show. I'm going to stop right here. Feel free to support this channel if you like. Not a have to, ought to, or should. I do have a buy me a coffee link. I do like coffee, and it's in the description of the video. Not a have to, ought to, or should. It is if you want to support the channel. Have a great day, and see you on the next episode.